What's happening, Reds? Welcome to the LFC Transfer Room, where today we'll be doing match reaction, which was Liverpool against Napoli yesterday in the Champions League. We'll also touch on some headlines that have gone through today once we've done the review. To discuss the match review with me and the other headlines today, I've got three wonderful guests, starting with Kev. How are you, mate? It was much better waking up to a result like that today, wasn't it, than it's been the last few weeks?
It was great being in the stadium as well. I got a little. I like the way it got feisty in the second half. It was it just woke everyone up, and it was a great game, and to come away with 3 points, 15 points out of 18, you can't grumble with that. Like, do you know what I mean? So, onwards and upwards, and you wait for Champions League. We're gonna go for that again. I think this year. I think it looks like. But no, all good, mate. How are you?
All good, mate. Very good. Like you said, Champions League, Klopp did say last season, booked the hotel for Istanbul, so let's hope he's right, mate. And what about you today, mate? You feeling a lot more happier that we've finally put in a decent performance?
Cautiously happy. I think we've had too many yo-yos in the past few weeks where we've had an amazing result and then dipped immediately afterwards. But thought it was encouraging, since it was a dead rubber match, that both sides, to be fair, went for it or put out decent strength team. And it was good to see our lads play well together. I think that just needs to be a habit. So even seeing a game that technically didn't really matter. And, as far as we were concerned, a 4-0 win or a 4-goal win to put us top of the group was pretty far stretched. But to put in a passionate performance, especially in that second half, seeing Nunez and seeing some players on it was a good habit to get into. So hopefully we are able to build from that. As much as we've heard that in the past few weeks, hopefully that's a good sign, and we'll just be optimistic from here. And let's take Spurs at the weekend.
Yeah, it does feel like every weekend's a bit of deja vu, that this is the week that we're back, and then we stumble, get back up, stumble, get back up. What about yourself, Tino? You feeling a bit more positive after the result, mate, or are you worried about deja vu again?
I mean, just based on how the season's gone, you've got to be worried about deja vu, about the topsy-turvy nature of our season so far. But if you're going to put in a solid performance against anybody and really kick off the season against anybody in Europe, it's going to be Napoli, who are arguably the most informed side in Europe at this moment in time. Undefeated run, which we've obviously got rid of now. And the one thing I'm actually more pleased about than anything else is not necessarily the result, it's how defensively solid for large portions of the game we looked. The intricate play going forward, and when we made subs in the second half, we didn't look like we lost any oomph going forward, which is really good to see. But for me, the defensive performance was unbelievable in comparison to what we've seen so far this season, barring maybe the Manchester City game. So it's really nice to see us actually reverting back to the 4-3-3 and not just falling apart. So hopefully this is signs of many good things to come going forwards.
Yeah, he makes a good point there, Kev, about how defensively sound we looked yesterday. How big an impact do you think Konate had in there, or do you think other players also influenced the solidity at the back?
I think there was others as well, but he was a standout. Yes, he was robust. He had that Matty roll about him as well, running forward. The ball looked as though he could look like a FIFA 23 player at times. The way he was coming out of defence and going into midfield and blocking people and everything. We've missed that though. We've missed that kind of thuggery from our back too. Do you know what I mean? We haven't had it from Virgil this season. He's been offered this as much. Matty, we haven't seen much of. Joe Gomez in fits and starts, but then has a brain fart every other game. So it's nice just to see Konate come in and be as dominant and as forceful shows to us that what we've been missing all season. Had he been alongside, I'm not saying anything would have changed, but I think we would have got a lot more points had Konate have been available to start from the start of the season. There were other good players. I thought Curtis Jones probably had one of his best games for us in a long while, and it's nice to see him. Or even though he's still getting the negativity, it's nice to see the young lad come in and play in a position where he's more confident and more prone to be able to do well. He still looks as though he needs a bit of confidence, but he done a good job. I thought Timothy was a good start performer yesterday. I think the whole back four looked more assured about themselves as well. And I think that's what Konate's brought into that as well. I think there's none of these slip-ups that we expect with other players that have played in that centre-half position. But no, he was a monster last night, and I'd hate to be a forward playing against him now because he dominated their number 9 last night.
I agree, mate. The whole defence was more sound yesterday. Even Trent looked confident enough against him. I'm going to call him number 77 because I can't pronounce that name. But I felt like he dealt with him really well. Whenever he was 1-to-1, he seemed to win the ball. With that though, as well, like he said about Konate coming out with the ball the way you'd normally associate that with Matip. Konate's kind of like a hybrid of half of Van Dijk with his dominance in the air, can play long passes, but then he can play with it at his feet as well. How big a player do you think Konate can become, with him only being, I think he's 22. How good can he get?
Yeah, he could be our starting center back for a decade if everything goes well and he decides to stay at the club. I think Kevin used the word that I really like, the dominance that he had in the back four was great to see, especially coming off injury, first game back. But I think along with his like robust abilities as a defender, he has a really great brain for how young he is in terms of experience and decision making. It's not just like a Nat Phillips, like I'm going to throw myself into every single challenge, and which we like to see. But there's a little more. A little more experience behind it in terms of knowledge, like when he's throwing in, how he's putting his body on the line, and how he's shunning offensive players off the ball. Like there's a lot of brain power behind what he does, as well as throwing his physical presence in the ring. So it's really great to see that combination, especially for how young he is, taking on that responsibility. I mean, started the Champions League final last year, so that just shows you what levels he's at, where Klopp thinks he is. And we've seen him, we've all seen how well he's performed. And again, it just goes back to his age of how young he is. It's amazing to see a player in that kind of where you can really get left to hang out to dry though, too. Like, and he hasn't really had too many of those moments. Like he's had a mistake here or there, but nothing along the lines of like a Joe Gomez hiccup every other week. It seems like he seems more sound as a defender. And again, at his age, we could see him in the team as long as he wants to stay with us for next decade easily. Yeah,
that's the thing as well. You make a good point there. He's so dominant in the air, but it's not as if he just heads it anywhere. He always seems to guide it to a player that's in space. How important, Tino, do you think it is having Van Dijk for Konate to learn from? Because he's obviously got exceptional attributes himself. He's fast, he's powerful. He's probably stronger than Van Dijk, to be fair. People just seem to bounce off him. How big an impact do you think it can be learning from Van Dijk over the next few years? Do you think he could surpass Van Dijk, or how high do you think his ceiling is?
That's a tough question to ask. Do I think he could surpass Van Dijk? I think he certainly has the attributes to surpass him. I personally feel much more secure having that partnership of Konate and Van Dijk at the back, the security, the physicality they both have. And if you're gonna learn off anybody in world football, it's going to be Virgil van Dijk, who is without a shadow of a doubt, arguably, or has been over the last couple of years, the best centre half in world football. Virgil has a mixture of everything, and if Konate can even pick up a small percentage of what Virgil van Dijk can offer, he's going to be a frightening centre half for the next 10 years plus. he just, the runs out of the defence that we saw so many times throughout that Napoli game is I don't think it's something we've seen a lot with him of late. It's something that he's evidently picked up. Joe Matip is a huge iconic figure for those winding runs where you think he's going to lose the ball every 30 seconds, but he never does. So he seems to be picking up different bits from a number of different players within our squad, and it's really nice to see. He's a phenomenal centre half, a truly phenomenal centre half. His performance was brilliant, and albeit he looked a bit rusty with his passing at times, he is just coming back from a bit of an injury and a bit of time out. So I would hope he starts going forwards. He certainly does have the attributes to overtake Van Dijk in the long run. Personally, for me, but it's just a waiting game. Hopefully, he's at the club for a long time now, for the next 10 years at least. But it's very nice to see him come back after a big injury and instantly look like he's in the swing of things, because it's very difficult to do with this Liverpool side.
Completely agree with you, mate. Good to see some of the regulars are in watching, Anassar and Jen, our season ticket holders, I call them. Big thanks, Jen, for the super sticker as well. Everything you put in, as you already know, goes straight back onto the channel. I want to go back to something Kev said before. Actually, he talked about Curtis Jones and said it was one of his better performances from Liverpool. It's mad online today, the contrast between fans. Some people are saying it was a good performance, like Kev said, and there's other fans who are absolutely just battering him, which I've got to be honest, I don't know why. He plays obviously on the left side yesterday. A lot of people have assumed he'd played the 10 and he didn't. He played left wing. I thought he's done a good job. He had 2 really good chances and played 2 cracking passes. He was unlucky. One of them never went through over the top. What did you make of his performance, Kev? Do you think he can build on it and should get another chance in the starting 11, or where are you with Jones?
Jones, he's Marmite with the club, with the supporters, very much so. Absolutely. I've never known a young player to have as much negative feedback every time he plays. Don't get me wrong. Some of it can be looked as criticism, and not rightly so. Now everyone's allowed an opinion, so I'm glad that we're all different and we all have it. But however, we all see games differently. I'll see it differently to someone who's watching on the telly, say, because I'm at the match. Dare to say, I'll probably miss things at the away games because I don't get to the away games as much as I used to. So everyone has their own option. I tend, when I go to watch the match, I homed in on him last night and I tried to see what he was doing. He was lacking in confidence, and it was rightly so. Coming off that game against Forest, as well as playing in midweek against Leeds as well, he kind of didn't look. He was ready. There was a few times where he was missing a few sighters, and what I mean by that is that the ball's come to him. If he had the quick look, one more pass and we were in to Bobby or to whoever on the other side. So he naturally looks for a Thiago. He always looks for Fabinho if he's stuck. I thought he done well against the dominant Napoli side, who were there just to put the feelers out on players. They weren't giving players much time on the ball, and he was one of them. But he dealt with it well, and he started to grow a bit. Thiago was talking to him a lot. He was talking back. It was the conversations that they were having during the game was good to see, and it was good to see even Curtis Jones putting his opinion in there as well as 2 pennies worth. So he wasn't being told what to say. He was also providing a bit of feedback himself. I thought he'd done all right. I thought he looked more natural than what he normally does in that midfield area. He looks a bit tentative at times, but I thought he looked more at home and more established on that left-hand side. And as long as the game went on, the more he was getting more confident, which is what tends to happen with Curtis Jones. It takes him it's a bit like us at the minute. It takes us a good half an hour, 45 minutes before we start getting going in the game and building our energy up. But he looked a little bit better. He got criticised for a few times off Virgil van Dijk for a few things that he wasn't doing, which I totally get, because he's on that side, and you are going to get abuse if you're not doing your job well. I'll be honest, Kris didn't give it much. He just gave him a look as if to say, okay, whatever, and just get on with it. But the way, don't get me wrong, it wasn't all niceties during the game, but there was parts of the game where you could actually see him starting to have a little bit more control, and you saw that in his little flicks and all like that he was doing. A couple of them came off, a couple of them never in the second half, when I think players were too far forward or too far back, and he was trying stuff then. The good thing was he wasn't trying to do that with FA Cup goal that he scored against Everton. He wasn't trying that last night, which is good to see. That's always a positive. That's the only negative I have with him, is that when he gets into that position, he's always looking for that far corner, regardless of what's on. I thought he'd done well. I thought he was unlucky with the first one. If he would have reacted a little bit quicker, I think he would have scored. But again, it's just little criticisms. But he's got how many games we've got left? We've got 3 games now, including a League Cup game till we finish. He can put his name down for the next 2 games. Can I see him taking over Diaz when he's fit? No. Can I see him taking over from a Jota if Diaz? No. So he has got to improve, and he has to make more of these chances that he's getting opportunities, because he's playing in a position that's more natural to him, but it's going to be far difficult for him to put down as a regular spot due to the quality that we have out there already. So that's where other opportunities may arise with formation changes, etc. But again, everything's being against Curtis Jones in certain games. I think he's come in at wrong times, when I think he's better when we've got more of our established 11 around him than having the fringe players. Because when he's around with the fringe players, he doesn't look anywhere near as good as what he could be. And last night proved that, in the sense that when he put him alongside of Thiago, and although Fabinho wasn't playing well, it helps him along. He plays a lot better. I think he gets heavily criticised when he comes into positions where it's not natural for him, and he's with a lot of fringe players that aren't actually up to the level of our starting 11. So he is playing in a position that is highly, looked at the time. It's a bit like when Danny Murphy was playing for us. Every time he had a bad game, everyone knew it was a bad game. And that's where the problem lies with Curtis Jones. I think he's still got a very good future at the club, but if he wants to be on that left-hand side, he's going to have to do a lot more than what he did last night for me.
Off topic, I actually loved Danny Murphy. I was gutted when we sold him, Honestly, I was really gutted. I completely agree with you, by the way, Kev. I think yesterday he grew more and more the longer the game went on. That little chip pass he tried I was gutted it never come off, but it was good that he had the vision and he was playing a forward pass, because we're lacking that in midfield. But Kev makes a good point there, Drew. Jones did impress a bit yesterday, but let's say he does play 4 or 5 games on the left wing and he is good. Could he realistically dislodge Diaz and Jota when they're back? Is it more likely that he needs to move more central in midfield, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, he needs to find his role in the team. I think it's clear on the eye test that he doesn't have the skills that, say, Diaz possesses, or the finishing that Jota possesses. But I think the biggest thing is, I think maybe a lot of people, myself included, forget this because he's been in the team for a while now, is that he's only 21. So it's not like he's 23, 24 years old. He's on the cusp of where he should be breaking in and finding his role more, or what he can offer, or where, like, the kind of route into the team. But he's still very young, all things considered. So he does have another season or two to really kind of put his name in there and find the balance that he can bring to the team. And aside from that, I agree with everything that Kev said. I think that he does have a future with the club. I don't think he'll displace Jota or Diaz, but I think he can find a role to fit in, especially with the likes of Milner and Henderson. probably out the door, or at least on the bench, primarily for the next seasons. But it almost kind of reminds me of when Kev said too, where Jones in on when the fringe players are playing. It's kind of hard to put, when you look at him, because now, again, when fringe players are in, you're kind of looking at him because he's been in and around the team for a few seasons now. So you're hoping he'll maybe take the lead or take the mantle on take the charge. But again, he's only 21. But with a fully fit team and like everyone in and putting him in there, I think he has shown really well when he's just slotted in or taken the place when there's been one in midfield injury or in those kind of games. We've seen him thrive. And kind of reminds me of like almost Henderson in the 13-14 season, which I think was probably his best season, was when Suarez and Sturridge and Sterling and Gerrard in midfield. Like you just had him with a free role to run around. And I always felt that was Henderson's best attribute in that year, just giving him a free rein. I'm not saying Curtis Jones is the same player as Henderson, but I think he can bring youthful energy to the squad, because I think he's very good at pressing. He has that kind of aggression that we love to see on the pitch, and that kind of lacks in our midfield. So we'll see. I think the most important thing Kev touched on too is like he needs to take these chances. He needs to put those questions to Klopp going forward, is how he needs to put it out, that how do you fit him into the team, because he can offer something that shouldn't be just left on the bench. But I'll go back to my first point of him being 21 years old. He's got a season or two to figure that out and put his name into the squad. So we'll see if he can.
It's a good point there as well to make Tino. Jones is only 21, 22, so he's not the only young player who's had a bit of criticism this season. Harvey Elliott has, as well as Jones, unbelievably. I think Elliott's been good, but considering their age, and more so with Jones, obviously he doesn't really get a consecutive go of games. Are we being a bit too harsh on these youngsters, or are we expecting too much from them? What's your take on it?
I think people do miss the fact that they are still very young. I think we are being very, very harsh on them. But those expectations come when you're playing for a club the size of Liverpool Football Club, with the expectations of every single person who steps foot on that pitch has to be up to the standard of the person they're replacing. I like Curtis Jones. I think he's a quality player. He's got a bit of flair, a bit of finesse about him, and he just, for me, it's just that run of games that he really needs, and I don't think he's gonna get it anytime soon. If I'm being for a prolonged period of time, when Diaz comes back, when Jota comes back, that's him in and around the squad. And I think sooner rather than later, he's going to have to either shoot his shot and try and force his way into the team, whether that's as a left winger, as centrally, as a 10, however, wherever Klopp and he thinks he's best suited. I think sooner rather than later, he has to make that decision to either shoot his shot or think, maybe I need to go elsewhere to play a bit more consistently and really develop a bit more in terms of first team football. But I have to say, Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, Harvey Elliott's been phenomenal. Curtis Jones was brilliant in the game against Napoli. Kev mentioned the two big chances he had. The first one where he just lifts it over the Napoli keeper Merritt, I think, something like that. And then the second from Firmino's flick back and the header. Arguably could have done better, but still, I thought he played phenomenally. And Drew really made a good point about the age. That is a really key factor for me, because it's not necessarily about just playing them in games and trying to get them and rush them into things. And it's about playing them in the right games and at the right moments and at the right time to really try and aid the development. And also, the one thing I think certain fans miss is the injuries of late he's had have really hindered him. he hasn't really had chance to get that consistent run of games in the side, and it has been a hugely frustrating season for him. He's missed the vast majority of the season so far with a calf injury, and it's just, I love him as a player, but I think his long-term future is away from Liverpool Football Club, and I'd expect him over the next couple of games to maybe get a bit more of a run. The derby games specifically, I'd expect him to start in, whether that's on the left wing or in midfield. But it's really up to him to try and hone down the position in terms of where he's going to play. I don't think, for me, of late, when he's played, the midfield position has really been the one for him. I think he has struggled at times. But it's just one of those things. He's still very young, still got a lot to learn, and there's a lot of quality players that he can learn off, he can develop his game with, and obviously try and transition from there. But for me personally, I think maybe his long-term future lies elsewhere.
I agree. I think he could have done with a loan move this season just so he could have a proper run of games in the Premier League, and then you're naturally confident when you know your own ability. I think when you play one game in every 5-6 and you've got injuries, you probably don't play your natural game because you're too busy trying to impress rather than just playing your natural game. So I'm with you, Tino. I think it'll be hard for him to be a starter for Liverpool in the future. Kev, we went back to 4-3-3 yesterday, and for me it was evident the press was back, which is what I think we've been lacking most of the season is our pressing. I think it's our identity really. It's going forward now. So we've got Spurs obviously Sunday. Do we stay with the 4-3-3 against Napoli, or do we revert back, because we haven't had any consistent results? So what do we do?
I reckon we just throw everything up in the air and see what falls first. No, I would. I'd like us to keep it if the players that played on last night were actually fit and available. I know Milner got a bit of an injury. I don't know whether it was a hamstring or concussion or whatever, but I'd like us to go back. But then it then poses the question, who you starting as your front three, and can Nunez play in a front three? And that is, I still think we are still looking for a formation and a style of play that suits him, and a style of play that he's confident in playing. Because if we play him in a 4-3-3, I don't think he's that confident with doing the press and having that confidence that if I go running here, I've got the confidence of knowing that there's 3 or 4 behind me doing the same. I know it sounds hard and difficult, but I'd like us to start with the 4-3-3. But that means that Nunez doesn't start for me. And I would bring him off the bench. You saw how chaotic and how manic he is. And what he can do in 20 minutes and what he can do in half an hour, I think that's more suited at the minute. I think Klopp is still wondering how to fit Nunez into our team and get the best out of him. And at the minute, if we start him, we're not playing a 4-3-3, and I think we looked better last night than we have done for a while. And it's always best to go back to the template that you know best and the players can play in. And I think we could cause more issues to Tottenham with a 4-3-3. But then that means, then do you start Nunez potentially on the left-hand side, on the left wing, where he's more predominantly, is more of his goals have come from for Benfica. But then you lose out on the running and the wing and the pressing side that Diaz and everyone else can bring in that can play in that position. So it poses more questions going to a 4-3-3 against Tottenham than what it does doing it in the Champions League game.
I'm glad you said that, actually. I was going to say to Drew, what would you go with, Drew? Would you go with 4-4-2, or would you do the 4-3-3 and maybe keep Firmino in the middle to do the dirty running and put Nunez on the left, like Kev just said? That was my thinking personally. What would you go with?
Yeah, I'd go with that, because I think at the moment with the injuries to Jota and Diaz, we're really just chopping and changing, trying to find the best way to get, the best players on the pitch. And I was buoyed by how defensively we there were shaky moments against Napoli for sure, but I felt we had a stronger structure, and I felt Fabinho had one of his better games. In like a position we've talked about it on the channel where he might not be best in the double pivot, but I felt him back in his normal position as the lone center defensive mid, at least in a 4-3-3, might be the best way to get him back to form, at least in this current, we got 3 games left. So I've said for the past few weeks now, we just need to limp over to the line and get as many points as possible. So I'd say you don't touch it too much from Napoli, but I'd like to see Nunez on the left. I felt that we asked the most questions of Napoli when he was on the pitch, and I give credit to what Kevin was saying. Like, him coming off the bench is an absolute live wire, and if alternatively, if we start him on the left and it doesn't work out, then our bench options are kind of shot. We'll be looking at bringing on Oxlade-Chamberlain to, bring some creativity to the pitch at that point. As much as I love Oxlade-Chamberlain, I don't like that being our situation if the 4-3-3 doesn't work and Nunez doesn't pan out, because I think it'd be tougher for him to get into the game later on if having a lackluster first 60 minutes and then changing from there. It's a tough one, but I'd still give the 4-3-3 a chance and see if we could blitz Tottenham from the start. But that being said, we haven't started games particularly well in the Premier League. So God, I don't envy Klopp's predicament for setting this up, but just for sake of answering your question, I'll go 4-3-3 and Nunez on the left.
I told the boys before the stream started the only reason I've got a hat on is because I didn't shave my head. If Oxlade-Chamberlain gets on the pitch Sunday, I won't need to shave my head. My hair will just fall out. Tino, where do you stand, mate? Kev did make a good point. We could play the 4-3-3 and put Nunez on the left. Where do you stand, mate? Do we go back to 4-4-2 or do we play 4-3-3? And if we do play 4-3-3, do you play Nunez on the left or do you bring him on as an impact sub? He effectively changed the game in a sense yesterday.
Wow, a difficult question to answer. For me, Klopp reverting back to the 4-3-3 last night against Napoli, a side who have dominated basically everybody so far, clearly shows that him switching it up to the 4-4-2 or the 4-2-3-1 wasn't necessarily working as well as he'd hoped. That's the way I view it, at least. That's the way I see it. I personally think that's him going, I tried to switch it up because it weren't working. We're now going to go back to the system that I'm happy with, that I'm stuck with, that has worked for us over a prolonged period of time. It's a tough question. It's a really tough question to answer. It's a familiar system to us, the 4-3-3. Playing Nunez on the left, I'm not overly convinced by, if I'm being totally honest with you guys. I'm not fully convinced, as much as, yes, he likes to sort of drift over there. Starting him on the left in the next game, I'm not with it, if I'm being honest. Personally, I would like us to just maybe stick with the 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2 or however you want to label that formation. I'd double pivot. And if I'm being even more honest, I would drop Fabinho. I think Fabinho needs a run of games out of the side. And yes, he's not the only issue we have. Don't get me wrong. I think dropping Fabinho, give him a little bit of a 2 or 3 game break. Even though we've got the World Cup coming, there's still going to be a lot of games come the end of the season. He needs a rest. He needs a break. He looks absolutely shattered. And I think if we do that, I think maybe, as much as I don't want to say it, Henderson and Thiago as a double pivot playing Bobby as a 10 and Nunez up top. He's chaotic, isn't he? He's a very chaotic player, Darwin Nunez. He seems to be a goal magnet of late, which is really, really nice to see. And I think he deserves a run of games because his season's really been like Curtis Jones. It's been stop-start. It's been very he plays, he then gets suspended. We get injuries, so Bobby plays, and then the next game it's Nunez, then the next game it's Jota, and then Jota gets injured, and then it's Nunez again. And switching it up every other game and bringing him on here and there is really not going to allow us to get used to the way he plays and figure out something in the long run of how he's going to be successful in this team from start to finish. Bringing him on for the last 5 minutes as much as he's been, last 25 minutes as much as been a big help. I don't think in the long run that's going to help him. And in the long run, our season is going to be, for me, negatively impacted as a result of that. I think you've just got to stick him up top and hope for the best and just see how we go. There's only a couple of games left anyways between now and the World Cup break. So I think you've just got to stick with him until the World Cup, and then you've got a long break to figure out how tactically you want to sort out this team and how tactically you want to approach the second half of the season.
I'm glad you mentioned Fabinho, actually, because I was with you. And it's funny, every Liverpool player seems to have fans on conflicting sides at the minute, whether it be Jones, Elliott, Fabinho, Trent. A few lads in the chat last night said they thought Fabinho played well, and obviously Drew thought Fabinho played well. I thought he was lucky not to get a yellow card within 10 minutes of the game. How he didn't get booked yesterday, I don't know. He made about 7 fouls at least. He was like Xhaka.
Yeah.
Like an imposter for Xhaka, because he always gets away with it as well. So, where do you stand with him, Kev, with Fabinho? Do you think he looked better yesterday because it was a 4-3-3? I don't think he looked that much better yesterday. I do, but he was that bad over the last couple of games. It'd be impossible not to look better. So, do you think it was because of the system change, or would you keep him in?
It's hard with Fabinho because he hasn't played anywhere near the level he's capable of, and this season so far he might as well have just been injured in certain games this season with the way he's played. Now we've changed formations, so he's had roast beef for the last 4 or 5 years constantly. He's changed it up a bit. He's gone with the spag bol. It's been all right, but it's still not good. He reverts back to the roast beef last night, and he looks, this looks great. This is great, and it feels nice again. It feels that we get the enthusiasm from all the players. It's great. You know, I like my analogies, so it's just. So just stay with me. But that's why he looked a little bit better because of the fact that, you know, he's back and playing in that template. He knows what to do in that system. Would I continue with them? I would, because there's only 2 games left. I'm sorry, but the alternatives, I would sooner have Fabinho playing out there. I would, if you're playing a double pivot with him, I'll be more to go with Bajcetic alongside Fabinho than going with a Henderson, because then you've got the running and the energy of the young lad who can do a little bit more than what Fabinho hasn't been able to do of late, and he can just concentrate on doing what he normally does. That's how I would go with if you're changing it against against Tottenham on Sunday. Fabinho, I think the alternatives for me mean that he starts and he plays. He looked all right last night. I agree with you. Is that he could have been sent off last night. There was a few challenges. There's one near their 18-yard line, and if he makes a challenge, we're in. But if he doesn't, it's a nailed on yellow, and he doesn't make it. He's late with his challenges, and it's as though the game's about 2 yards ahead of him. It's as though he's on like a dial-up and everyone else is on the fast beating internet. You
You're
just
showing your
can't
age
get
there.
anywhere.
You're showing
I know,
your age there.
I know,
that,
Tyler. I'm with you,
no,
Kev.
but that's what it feels like. It feels as though he's about a yard or two behind everything that's going on. So his reactions look like that. It looks lust there. He looks as though he's lost. He's getting a long enough break, and he's in the World Cup squad. Sound happy days. Go and do whatever you need to do with your head and then come back. He's got a long break to come, but we need him on Saturday for me. So
I'm going to have to get a little logbook of Kev's analogies for anyone who doesn't know what he means, because they're spot on. I love them. So, might do a thing where if you subscribe, you get a Kev analogy book. Which reminds me, actually, if you are new to the channel and you are watching, or if you're not new and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do, and make sure you like the video. I'm glad that it's Tino and Kev just mentioned the double pivot. You keep setting me up for the next thing I'm going to say anyway. So I watched a bit of Spurs last night too, and they played when Mourinho used to park a bus. I don't know what these were parking. It was like a submarine. Like, I've never seen a team so negative. Do Liverpool need to play a double pivot against Tottenham, given how negative Conte's been setting up?
Oh, that's an interesting point. I'm curious now, is Son, do you know if Son's cleared for the weekend because he got taken off?
I heard an interview today saying that he said he felt all right after the game. Whether or not that gives him the green light, I don't know, but I'd take it as he's probably going to play.
I honestly, like, we've done well against Spurs. It's not like we haven't played a Spurs team that hasn't parked the bus before. We tend to do pretty well against them in recent years, if I'm not mistaken, with the 4-3-3. I think it just goes back to what we all were saying. It's like, do we change it again? Do we go back? I think it really depends on how we can get the best out of who we have on the pitch. I think the longer term question of do we go with 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2, I think it tends to the latter for the longer term when everyone's fit. But I think since not everyone's not fit, maybe going back to the roast beef, as Kevin said, where everyone knows what they're doing at this point is the best way to do it, because I think we have been exposed with the lack of depth and just chopping and changing. I like the idea of the 4-2-3-1 or the 4-4-2 diamond going forward, but it almost seems like Klopp threw that on because the 4-3-3 wasn't working. We were doing really poorly. And it's like, when it goes back to kind of gut instincts or, mechanics of what you're used to, none of these players have had a preseason with that formation. That's not how Liverpool has traditionally played. So I think if you look at our squad lineup, everyone bar Nunez knows the 4-3-3 in and out. So I'd say stay with that for Tottenham, and we've seen it break down their defense in the past, and we'll see if we can do it again this Sunday. But that's how I'd approach it.
Tino, you mentioned the double pivot obviously when you brought up Fabinho, which led on to it. So would you play a double pivot against Spurs? And if you did, who would be in your double pivot if you're not going to play Fabinho? Or would you put Fabinho back in?
If I would, it's a big call, but I wouldn't play Fabinho.
You wouldn't?
I would not play Fabinho.
Yeah,
no.
Sorry, I just didn't hear you. That's not me going like, what, you wouldn't? I just couldn't hear you.
No, it's all good. I'd drop Fabinho. I'm kind of inclined towards Thiago and Henderson, as much as that double pivot frightens me. It's the only other logical option. If we do drop Fabinho, I think it'd be too harsh on Stefan Bajcetic. I've definitely butchered his name. I think it'd be way too harsh to just throw him into the deep end against a very difficult Spurs side. I think we have to. Oh God, and you've made me question myself. you've made me question myself, because I'm sat here thinking 2 games left. One of them's against Derby in the cup. We're going to play like our under 12s at that game anyways. Do you just throw Fabinho into this side, play Fabinho and Thiago, and then for the Derby game play Bajcetic and play Harvey Elliott and all the other Curtis Jones and Carvalho and all the other youngsters, just to get some legs into them against, let's be realistic, a very trash Derby side. So I've changed my mind, I've changed my mind.
Oh.
I think you all have had a positive impact on me, or a negative, depending on how the game goes, I guess. Fabinho, Thiago, and I would like to see Bajcetic come on 70, 75 minutes if the game is going well, which, knowing us, probably won't happen. So yeah, you've changed my mind. I'm now kind of inkling towards the Fabinho starting and then just figuring the rest out during the break.
That's why we love football discussions, different views. No, you make a good point, mate. I think playing Bajcetic against Spurs for his first full debut, I think that's the deep end. Even if they are negative Tottenham and park ships instead of buses, it's still a huge game to have to come into. I'm going
to be brutal. Can I just jump in? The one player I would throw in the deep end at Spurs is Ramsey.
Yeah.
As much as he only came on for a short period of time, he looks bright. He looked very aggressive going forward. But he also, from the under-21 games I've seen, defensively he looks quite good as well. I think a question needs to be raised there in regards to Trent and in regards to his defensive frailties at times this season. He looked okay against the Georgian kid who, again, nobody knows how to pronounce his name.
77.
77. He looked all right against him, but again, at times he got caught out defensively. He got caught flat-footed. If you're going to throw any of the youngsters into that game, for me, he's the one.
He did look very sound on the ball as well. I looked a little flicky on behind his, I don't know what you call it, when you press circle and X on FIFA. A little flicky done. He looked comfy on the ball, and it's mad because he's not tall, but he looked like a giant, I thought. But
no, I'll be brutal
anyway.
as well, though, Jay. I'm going to say leave the analogies to Kev, because parking the ship and the boat on the bus was quite poor.
That's why I haven't got a book, lad. That's why Kev's got one. True, lad, you could have waited till we went off air for that. We'll move on, and I won't ask through any questions on the rest of this. If he loses a connection, it'll be a coincidence. So, today we're linked with a midfielder that we haven't been linked with for 2 years and haven't been pursuing for 2 years. But Bild, the German publication, have come out and said that Liverpool owners, FSG and Klopp have come to the agreement that we'll go all out for Bellingham for 100 million. I've muted his name on Twitter now because I'm sick of hearing about him. But if Liverpool sign Bellingham, Kev, can that save FSG from having all the people who want them out, or do you think it's too late now?
I think it's a nice little gift that will make people or supporters move away for a year or two until something else happens. I'll be honest, but Bellingham, this Bellingham saga is going to carry on. We're going to have trivial statements coming out from now, if not since the end of the transfer window, and continuing now until Bellingham comes out and he gets asked every time he plays, what's your position, what are you going to do? And nothing's going to change. We just got to deal with it. I tend to, when I see this, I just tend to switch social media off completely and go back watching, Peppa Pig with the kids and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just I'm sick and tired of having to talk and raise another reason why we need Bellingham. It's evident that we are going to be in for him. We'll be stupid if we're not. And whether we are going to go full heart in, the worst thing about it is I've always heard those two little words that come together next summer from FSG, and it's getting a bit beyond a joke with the way that comes out. Don't get me wrong, it's great that what they've done is, and I mentioned it on the last time I was on, and I didn't actually mention it. I didn't actually go about it well. I think it's great that we've got the facilities because it's an actual catch-22. If you're making money, you need the actual facilities to be up to a sustainable amount, whether that's the training park to entice players to play, and the income to come in and the revenue to come in by having the stadium up to or upgraded as well. At the same time, though, you do need those actual players to be brought in and moved on. Now, if you're moving players on, the problem we've got is that we're too loyal and we're not ruthless enough. We haven't replaced certain players, and we've allowed players to go for no money at all, which means that if you look at the Chelsea model that we've done, if you look what Chelsea done, they haven't got rid of just odds and annoying let his contract go. They've got the money in and have moved them on and go, right, Sam, I've got 30, 40, 50 million. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we're keeping older players longer than what we need to. Prime example, Dick Origi scores the winning goal in the Champions League. We could have sold him for about 20, 30 million. But what do? We sit back and turn around and go, do you know what? He's made up to be on the bench. Oh, happy days. That'll do us. We'll move on. And then he ends up leaving for nothing. And we get hardly anything back for him. That's where the problem lies, and that's where our ruthlessness needs to come in, and that's where people like the CEO should be coming in and having those harsh ways and going, right, we need to move these players on because they're getting to that age. Henderson could have went after the Champions League final and no one would have batted an eyelid, or Milner as well. That's how ruthless we've got to be. Ferguson's done it for years. Paisley done it the last time when he was in charge for us. Dalglish in his first stint with us done it. Souness tried to do it far too quickly and far too ruthlessly, in which we get rid of Beasley for £1 million to Everton, which was the worst thing that could have ever happened to the club. Houghton goes as well because he's out of a certain age. There's loads of examples through the years of how loyal us as a club have been and how ruthless we aren't. We have shown in certain times when Martin Edwards was with us of moving players on for ridiculous amounts of money. Solanke, who else? Jordan Ibe. There's others as well. Jerome Sinclair goes as well. The lad who's now at Sheffield United, the forward who we sold for 23 million. Brewster.
Yeah, Brewster.
Do you know what I mean? So exactly. But that's what the club should be doing. That's what we should be doing, and making those calls now with the academy players and with certain players around the fringe players that we've got. The problem is we're letting contracts move down, and without establishing that actual amount, like Keita, we've allowed Keita get to a position now where his net value for us is 0. Yeah. And it's not. We know he has a value of about 30 to 40 million. Whether we like that or not, there are people and there's teams in Germany that would love him and still admire him. We haven't done our best to keep hold of him and sign the contracts a little bit earlier so that we keep the value of the team up. If you look at our value of our team has gone down a lot because we're not doing, and that's the whole point of extending the contract. It's not to give them better money, which is also an added bonus for the player. It's also establishing the net value of that player so that if any player does come in, we can sell on and move on and get a decent amount for them. That's where our failings are as a club. And that's where the likes of Wijnaldum's allowed to go on. We're not, and we don't even bring anyone in. Minamino, Origi, a few others go. It's getting to the point now where if you look at this squad, we've got an ailing squad, and it's the third worst in the league. We are going to have to move on. Van Dijk, whether you like it or not, Van Dijk, Robertson, Alisson, you've got players, Fabinho, Salah, and that's in the next 3 to 4 years. So this is where we need to be a little bit more ruthless. We've got to. This is about establishing a routine and a loop within and a cycle and a process. We haven't got that at the minute. And that's because we're too loyal and we're allowing players to stay because they've done a great job for the last 4 or 5 years, but they've reached their actual peak as players for us for the gegenpressing. And it's proven and it's showing now in the stats and how they're playing. That's the issue we've got. And until that's broken, nothing's going to change. So coming out with all this, oh, well, we're going to buy this and trivial things about Bellingham, that's going to continue. Whether you like it or not, there's going to be ones about Chelsea. There's going to be ones about City. There's going to be ones about everyone else who's in the Real Madrid as well. There's going to be loads that we're going to have, and everyone's going to have a fume and react to it because they think, oh, that's it. Now, we're out of the race. We'll always be in the race, but how much of the race we're in will be dependent on what we put forward and whether the package he deems is fit enough for him to go to. But certain things have to change for me at the club, and we're coming to a very worrying side for me for the next 3 to 4 years. When you look at the age of the squad and the type of players we've got to replace, it's scary.
It is, mate. I completely agree. I think you missed the trick. Not getting at least one midfielder this season, and the Chelsea model that you're on about, City are doing it. They've just sold Sterling, Jesus. Angelino went like 2 seasons ago, didn't play a game, but they have players out on loan who they get 20-30 millions for. So I know what you mean about the model. True, I don't know if I want to ask you a question, to be honest, mate. Your attitude to things. So other than the build report saying we'll go on in for Bellingham, the journalist Janag Fortoff, if that's how you pronounce his name, he said that there's an unnamed club that are going full throttle as hard as they can to get Bellingham. So that and build together, do you reckon that's us to do? Do you think realistically we can get him in January as well? I don't think this is meant to be summer.
You're asking if we can get Bellingham in January?
Yeah, well, this is the talk, the agreement for January. Whether he comes in January or it'd be summer, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, realistically, probably not. On a big, I think it's going to really depend on how well England do in the World Cup and how well Bellingham performs. Because I think if he has like an absolute, blinder of a World Cup and is one of the best players in like the team of the tournament kind of thing, that automatically sees like 100 million price tag bumped up. So, and I think that could eventually price Liverpool out. But I think it's, back to your question, does that exonerate FSG if they get Bellingham? I think it's not, we can't just sign one player. I know one thing that me and you are probably in complete sync with is Barella, like a player like Barella. Yeah. I think there needs the biggest, disappointment I've seen or experienced as a supporter is our lack of option Bs or Cs. It's like we're going option A, and if we don't get him, well, we're not even going to go option B. And while that might be an interesting business point and that might serve well in certain situations, I think when the alternative option is letting our squad age and not refreshing because we're stubborn and only want option A, we're seeing the fruits of that kind of thought process now. And a team that's constantly injured, aging. We used to have like a young squad. Now, as Kevin said, we're like the third oldest, team in the Premier League. And it's interesting though, because I said this in the chat the other day, but I still like every club that's trying to build up or has been in the past few years has tried to model FSG. Like Arsenal has come out and said, we're trying to do the Liverpool way. Newcastle, same thing. And you see where those clubs, Milan, you see where those clubs have gotten using that kind of our model essentially. And I think it just goes back to Kevin saying we just haven't been ruthless, and we've kind of been, sitting back, like resting on our success. I think Manchester City's dominance has to be taken into account. As I said in the chat as well, but we just need to be more proactive at the end of the day. And Bellingham in would be great, but it's not just one signing. We need more than one. We need to kind of be more ruthless. As Kevin said, we need to cut out the players that just clearly aren't going to be, first team options. We need to get players on the bench. Like when we have all our players fit, when we had Jota, when we had Diaz, the bench looked intimidating, but we need it to be even deeper than that, or we need it to be that ruthless as much as possible. We know the players who are injury prone. We can't keep waiting and giving them new contracts. We just need to cut the dead wood at this point. As much as that sounds ruthless, I think players are professional too. I think they don't want to be babied, and I think if you come at them and say, hey, your time at the club is up, we appreciate your service and you'll always be family, it'd probably be best for you to find the next step in your career if you want to keep playing first team football consistently. I think it just needs to be that business side of the game needs to be brought to the forefront as far as transfers go. But yeah, my laptop's about to die, so Jay, you might get your wish and see me cut out in a bit. So I'll pass it on to Tino.
Well, yeah, it's a very good point, mate. And I think with FSG as well, they need to spend that much money in summer. They're going to need to get onto Elon Musk, because one signing Bellingham doesn't fix this. We need 2 or 3. I'll finish with you, Tino. Finish this theme with yourself. Do you think Liverpool realistically have a chance of signing Bellingham? And if not, who would, or if Liverpool fail in pursuing Bellingham, who'd be the alternative? Like Drew mentioned, we haven't had a plan B before. Who would be your plan B if we can't get him? And before that, who do you think we could get him?
Do I think we could get him? I think we're in the conversation. We have to be. We're one of the biggest clubs in the world. He's a phenomenal midfielder, phenomenal player. We're bound to be in the conversation. Do we have a realistic chance? Personally, I don't think he comes to Liverpool Football Club. At least not this year or next year. I don't think his next move away from Borussia Dortmund will be to us, unfortunately, as much as I'd love it to be. We've already mentioned on the stream, Barella. I think he's a phenomenal player. I absolutely adore him. But again, I don't think it's too realistic. I'd expect us to just sign some random, just completely, someone who's not been linked before. Someone just, this random kid from like 22, Serbia. 23, from Serbia or some shit. Like, just, it seems like we get linked with all these big players, and then maybe 1 out of 6 or 7 of them will come off. Alisson, Thiago, Van Dijk, and then everybody else is just trickles in, and it's just like random players and players that nobody else expected. I wouldn't be too surprised if we're having a midfield overhaul this summer, which I would expect us to, with Naby Keita leaving, Oxlade-Chamberlain leaving, Milner potentially leaving. I'd expect us to sign maybe 1 or 2 just different brand new players who've not been linked before, and then still have those Bellingham links going on for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that'll probably go on, to be honest, until he's already moved to Madrid. We'll still be linked to them. But we'll call it there for the stream. Thanks everyone for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do. Like the video. Thanks to the 3 lads who've gone through the discussion with me, Kev, Drew and Tino. Make sure you follow their Twitters. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow again at 7:30. We're on every night. Thanks for watching again. For that.